I've been studying Mandarin for 3 years total, 2 semesters of introductory college classes, and then apps and self-study after that. I would consider myself to be around HSK5 in terms of my comprehension after very roughly about 800 hours of self-study. In this video, just like the previous one I did for Spanish, I'll be discussing what my current level is and what my daily routine is, so let's get into it. In terms of skills of language, I like to divide things into reading, writing, speaking, and listening. However, I haven't really outputted it all because I'm focused more on understanding everything first and then working on speaking. Therefore, I'll only be talking about my reading and listening skills and not my speaking and writing skills. My reading is better than my listening in terms of comprehension, and that's probably due to how many new Anki cards I do every single day. Usually, I like to read articles on Zhihu and Weibo, and most of the words I come across are either marked as HSK6 or unmarked, and that's why I call myself HSK5 right now. Acquiring the main idea of the article is something that comes pretty easy, but there's always so many words that I come across all the time. In the 2 semesters of college classes that I took, we were instructed to learn traditional characters, not simplified. And given that I make all of my Anki cards in traditional characters, reading a text in traditional is just a lot easier than reading it in simplified. I personally don't do this anymore, but there is this really cool browser extension where you can press one button and it automatically can flip the characters from traditional to simplified. But I don't use that anymore, but it's a pretty cool extension nonetheless. My listening is worse than my reading, as I usually have to follow the subtitles when I'm watching Bilibili or Netflix or any user-generated content. In terms of my level, I can get through a podcast of Talk Taiwanese Mandarin with Abby almost no problem. A podcast of 声东击西 would be with light lookups, and still 故事 FM is pretty challenging. Figuring out the tones for a word and the pinyin has become second nature, but there's still the diversity in which people speak, which makes listening so much harder than reading. I have mentioned that I technically haven't really outputted in terms of writing or speaking, but I have tried writing down characters or copying down characters from articles online in terms of trying to make my handwriting better. You can personally judge for yourself, but I think that my handwriting kind of sucks. And that's not even mentioning writing down characters from memory. Biggest weaknesses. Numbers seem to go in one ear and out the other. At least with Spanish, I have more time to physically process the word, but with this language, the numbers are so compact that I barely have any time to process what's being said. When I see the character j when I'm reading, my brain just shuts down. I think I get what it means, but I haven't fully grasped the meaning, which is why I really hate that character. The 以为主 structure is so tough. I've tried so many times, but I just can't wrap my head around the concept 100%. Measure words are like limits in calculus. The number of them gradually approaches infinity, but it never quite gets there. Remembering the second phrase or grammatical structure is really important, but I still do forget them sometimes. For example, you would always say 虽然但是, like you would never say 虽然也 or 虽然就, at least from my understanding. I'll put some more examples of the words here that I'm talking about. Reading cursive or just handwriting in general really surprised me with how difficult it is. Luckily though, I found an Anki deck which focuses on this sort of thing, so I'll put a link to it in the description. Speaking of Anki, it's the primary way that I study, so I'll be explaining how I make all of my decks. My main vocabulary deck contains all the new words that I find when I'm either reading or watching video content. I do 30 new words a day for this deck, which always keeps me learning new content. When I come across a new word, I put all the definitions I find on the back of the card. Around a month ago, I started only using a Chinese to Chinese dictionary, so basically a monolingual dictionary, and that is when a Chinese word is defined in Chinese and not in English. The only time I'll use an English definition is when either the monolingual definition doesn't show up, or if I can't understand the monolingual definition. If I can't guess how a character is pronounced, then I'll just use the Pleco app on my phone to search it up. And in fact, I might use a couple example sentences on there to help me fully grasp the meaning of the character. For pronunciation, I used to use pinyin, but now I only use zhuyin in order to make it harder on myself. As previously mentioned, I usually read articles on Zhihu and Weibo, which makes it easy for me to copy and paste the sentence and paste it directly into my Anki card. What I personally found is that understanding the entire sentence and how that word fits within the sentence helps me understand how to use the word in real life, and it also helps me how to fully grasp the meaning of the character. On top of just articles, I watched a lot of YouTube and Bilibili content as well. And in fact, I have an entire YouTube account that's dedicated only to watching Chinese content. One of the best parts about Chinese social media is that there's tons of subtitles everywhere, and that makes it easy for me to sentence mine. Now, since YouTube and Bilibili subtitles are physically embedded into the video, I can't really copy and paste a sentence. I could physically just type it out, but at the same time, that would take a little bit too much time. So I came up with a 200 IQ idea. There's a free program called ShareX that's great for macros, screenshots, hotkeys, and that sort of thing. I have it set up to where I can press a single button on my keyboard, and then that goes to a resizable screenshot macro in ShareX. I then screenshot the subtitles in the video, and then since there's an option to have it copy the file for you, I just paste that into Anki. If I need multiple screenshots, then it automatically saves to a folder, so I can just drag and drop them from there. The image size can be a little weird sometimes, so I use an image resizer add-on in Anki to help me resize the image to the dimensions that I want. So to recap completely, I put the word in traditional characters on the front, and then put monolingual definitions on the back. The English definition only goes on there if I can't understand the monolingual definition, or if I can't simply find the monolingual definition. I paste the juin below that, and then I either copy and paste the sentence in which I found it, or I screenshot the subtitles and paste that in there. If I need it, I might even screenshot the entire image in order to help my future self grasp what the image or what the scene was about in case I forget about it. Something very frustrating is finding a new character in Simplified, but realizing it was actually a traditional character that I already knew before. I make pretty simple cards for these to help me remember. For podcasts, I usually listen to 故事 FM, 声东击西, or Nice Try, and I'll put a couple of my favorites up here as well. I used to make Anki cards for the words that I found within the podcast, but I don't really do that anymore because typing out the example sentence for that would be so tedious. So what I do instead is just look up the word on the spot and try to remember it. Again, you don't have to use Anki for remembering everything. I know I'll eventually come across that word later. The Mandarin sentence mining deck contains all of the sentence cards that I make within Netflix, including the image and the audio. You may recall one of my previous videos where I explained the very tedious method I use for sentence mining Mandarin video clips. I was recommended to try out Megaku, which goes directly with Anki, which basically does everything that I did in that video so tediously, but in a more streamlined process. I tried it and it made sentence mining Netflix so much easier. And this isn't sponsored, by the way. I just really like the program. Recently, though, they've changed their business model. So before, you could technically get away with paying a single payment of $5 a month and get everything. But now they're doing a subscription model where you do $5 every month. So even though it's miles more efficient than my old tedious method, it still could come into use if you either don't want to spend the money or if you don't have money. As mentioned previously, this deck is for recognizing messy handwriting, so I'll put a link to that in the description. Finally, I have a culture deck for knowing cultural information and traditions. This deck isn't really special. I just went to some random website and copy and pasted all the information in there. And I'll probably do that process again once this deck runs out of new words. All of the previous methods that I mentioned in this video are through active immersion, which means that I'm intensely studying and looking up almost every word that I come across. I've been trying to get more into passive immersion though, so I usually listen to podcasts while I'm driving to and from college. I also have tried a method where I just listen all day, even when I do homework, but what I found is that it just really distracts me when I do homework, and I can't focus on both at the same time. Like I'm either doing homework or listening to the podcast, not both. My goals for this language is to do everything that a native can do and know everything that a native knows. And that includes handwriting, which is really important, as well as history and customs and everything like that. To get there, I do at least half an hour of sentence mining or podcast listening, and then I do around 45 minutes of total Anki time. If you see my previous video on my daily routine and current level in Spanish, you should note that I put in the same amount of time and effort into learning Spanish as I do for Mandarin as well. Around a 2-hour per day minimum for both languages combined is about the most I can do without juggling them across different weekdays. Even though my Spanish is way better than my Mandarin, and I wouldn't even call myself fluent in Mandarin yet, I still put in the same amount of time for both languages. Number one, because I want to improve my Spanish and not just maintain it. And number two, because I plan on taking the Spanish C2 test in around 7 months. But anyway, I digress. That's it for this video. Like it if you liked it, and dislike it, no. Tell me in the comments if you disliked it. And also ensure to subscribe with the notification bell so that you don't miss a video of mine. Check out my Twitter as well for progress updates and my general thoughts on languages. See you guys in the next video. When I come across a new word, if I can't guess the understanding the entire sentence and I have it set up to where I can press a single button on my keyboard and that maps to a resizable. Speaking of Anki, is the primary way that I study, so I'll be explaining and summarizing now since YouTube and Bilibili's subtitles are physically embedded in the videos, I can't really copy and paste the subtitles into my